Hey there, welcome back to the show. Today I have an awesome guest with me, one of my colleagues, Dena Norton. Dena has been a registered dietitian for over 20 years, working in the conventional medical system and the holistic and functional medicine spheres. She's the owner of Back to the Book Nutrition, a website and virtual nutrition practice that has helped hundreds of people around the world overcome chronic digestive and hormonal symptoms. After helping midlife women for years, Dena entered her 40s and was hit with low libido, midsection weight gain, and sleep disturbance. This wake up call drove her to research perimenopause more deeply than ever. And after applying what she learned, has reduced her symptoms and feels better in control of her health. Now, Dena is passionate about helping fellow 40 something women navigate this topsy turvy stage of life through her 40s Fix program, which leverages proven strategies to curb symptoms, help women feel great in their bodies, and significantly reduce the risk of chronic diseases that plague so many aging women. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Dena.
Yeah, so glad to be here, Claudia.
Yeah. So I invited you on the show because I know that you do your due diligence, and I'd like to chat specifically today about soy and how it can benefit perimenopausal women. But before we dive into all of that, you and I have a similar philosophy when it comes to diet in general, not just from like a scientific standpoint, but also what we see in practice and with respect to women's cultural backgrounds, beliefs, and personal preference. So, knowing that every woman is unique and we can only share, of course, general recommendations here, what is your general approach and observations when it comes to diet for perimenopausal women?
Yeah, I would say, my general approach is like where research meets real life.
Mhm.
So we want to be informed about what we know from research and observing populations. But like you say, we're all different and research doesn't know everything. The whole definition of research is discovery, right? So
Right.
we know that we don't know it all. And we've been wrong plenty of times before, whether you're talking about us with a big U, the research community, or us as individuals. I've certainly been wrong and pivoted on a lot of stuff. I learned new things preparing for this talk. So
Mhm.
it's really like taking what we know that we know, what we think that we know, and then putting it through the lens of your life. Where are you starting? What are your goals? How can we move you toward them at whatever pace you need to go? So that's kind of like how I approach it. Now, in the details of it, I would say in midlife, the lens that we're going to look through as we look at your real life and evaluate it and improve it is like, I think the research is abundantly clear, and I've seen it in practice. Most of us need to crank up the protein, some,
Mhm.
not into oblivion, but some, maybe a lot, depending on the woman. And we need to surround that with a ton of different colorful plants. And if you're really diligent about that, most of the time, with a little bit of fun here and there, you
Mhm.
will feel so much better. You will be so much healthier, and you really don't have to go like needling around with all of the minutia. So if you just start there and get more consistent with it, you will have a leg up on everybody else, and then you can fine tune.
Yes.
So I'm always about order of operations, first things first, getting you the highest ROI with the fewest amount of steps because nobody wants to work harder than they have to.
Mhm.
And then we can, look at your labs and, we can sort of get into the nitty gritty as needed, but we start with the foundations because they pull the most weight.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So speaking of protein, why is it so important for women in this stage of life to ramp it up?
Yeah. Um, Gosh, manifold reasons, right? I think that a lot of the aging literature and
Mhm.
aging conversation is centering the protein discussion around sarcopenia, this age-related loss of muscle that starts at some level in our 30s as we lose
Mhm.
hormones. It's all driven by hormones, primarily driven by hormones, but really cranks up in earnest when we're in the throes of perimenopause and certainly into menopause. So this sarcopenia issue, which is just losing muscle when you didn't even try. It's really unfortunate, but it really is a driver of inflammation and blood sugar dysregulation and lower bone mass and all of the things that seem to plague us as we get older
Mhm.
and really do set the stage for chronic disease and early death. So I think that really is why protein has come to center stage and deserves to be there. So it really is necessary to build your muscle. If you don't eat enough protein, it's really hard. That's like blocks that go into a block tower for little kids. You can't build the tower if you
Mhm.
don't have the blocks. So critical for that. It also happens to run so many other things in your body, your immune system, your hair, skin, and nails. So many things are protein molecules in their so it's really important for that reason and those reasons. in real life for real women, I just find, as I'm sure you do in practice, protein is like this lever for feeling more satisfied, for feeling less cravey, less highs
Mm.
and lows throughout the day with your mood, with your energy, with your cravings. It helps you not feel like you're always like looking for a little something, something. Like it helps
Yep.
you just be good and done
Yeah.
and move on with life
Mhm.
until it's time for the next meal. So when it comes
Exactly.
to weight management and food relationship and when do I eat and what do I eat and how much do I eat, if you're all up in your head about all that business, protein is one of the like one small changes that can really make that a lot easier for you. It's such
Mhm.
a small effort for such big return. I mean, I had a client tell me a while back, she's like a, I would say a mindful vegetarian, a well done vegetarian, right? Doing it
Mhm.
right. Like all these like wonderful plants and nutrient dense and great. Not enough protein. Like
Yeah.
nobody. And she literally said, like, in 2 days, I felt better than I have in a year. I had no clue how far off the mark I was. That's all it took for her. And there's more to do, of
Mhm.
course, but that was the biggie.
Yep.
So it really just hits so many targets. I could go on with other reasons, but those are some of the top ones in the women I work with.
Yeah, we see the same thing. And I often get on my soapbox, as I'm sure you've seen, when it comes to that. I'm like, I get it. There's a lot out there, and there's so many different modalities and diets and this and that and fasting and not fasting, and it can make your head spin. And I'm like, this one thing you can implement could actually be really helpful. And I know it almost seems too simple, but it can be. We don't have
It
to
can
make
be.
out so complex.
Mhm.
Um, so on that note, why I wanted to chat a little further with you was about soy, because you and I both recommend animal protein. And even in the past, perhaps we've both been kind of like, yes to animal protein. And at least for myself, maybe a little more closed minded to plant based protein. But many women prefer to eat a more plant based diet, like I said, due to cultural, their background, their belief system, personal preference. I personally was a vegetarian years ago. And soy has been around for thousands of years. So I think it would be foolish to not really dig into the research and better understand how it can benefit women. So let's dig into that. Can you explain the role of phytoestrogens in soy?
Yeah. Let me just do a quick preface too on that
Mhm.
whole conversation about plant versus animal proteins. Really doesn't have to be either or, as you alluded to. But I think usually when the like, we'll just say the animal protein camp, those people who are like animals first and foremost, and maybe even only like, yikes, that's a bit much. But
Mhm.
the people who are really forward about animal proteins being so far superior, usually that is based on the protein quality. There are a few different scales in the scientific literature about how to measure protein quality, but basically it's this: there are amino acids, like, when I was in nutrition school, we learned it as like amino acids are like a pearl on a pearl necklace, and the protein is the necklace. So it's like all these little beads together make the necklace. So you have all these different amino acids to make a protein, and different plants and animals have, different ones. There are some, nine, we can't make. We have to get from our diets, and our body does need them. And so it's really important that we have a diet that provides those. Well, those are found, all nine of them, in animal proteins. Hence, it's great quality. Pick your animal protein of preference. Boom, all nine amino acids that are essential. Plants are kind of mix and match. Some will have some will have others. They don't usually have all. Soy is one exception to that. It is a high quality plant protein in that it has
Mhm.
the essential ones. There are a few others. So, sidebar, soy is an exception in that way. It is a plant protein that is a really good quality plant protein. But that's generally what the conversation is about. That if you're going to rely only or almost entirely on plants for protein, you're going to have to eat more plants and a broad variety, and maybe even be more conscientious about which ones you're
Mm.
getting in a day and in what amounts to make sure you hit those nine amino acids in the right amounts. I really don't think that for most of us in midlife who are savvy, who are forward thinking, who are trying so hard to make our one thing in life eating more protein, because Instagram tells us, because Claudia and Dina are like banging that drum too, like we all know protein is at the top of our to-do list. Great. If we are aiming for, let's just say, double what our needs, our base needs are for survival, which is what the RDA is, right? It's too low. Everybody agrees, yada,
Yep.
yada. We're like doubling that. Okay. We are
Mhm.
really shooting high for protein. I think we need to. I think we should. I think there's benefit.
Mhm.
But the higher you go on your total protein consumption in a day, the less important it is that every piece of protein, every bite of protein that you eat is animal protein or the best
Mm.
quality protein because you're just getting so much, you are going to hit those base amino acid needs, period. End of
Yeah.
story. Assuming you're not a vegan or a very strict vegetarian. I can even work like within a vegetarian diet, especially if you're open to dairy and eggs and maybe even seafood as a bonus, like
Mhm.
easy peasy. The rest of us who are eating a variety of different foods in a day and, seafood and animal foods and also some plants, like it almost is not an issue. Almost. I would say the only exception to that is women who, yes, are eating this mixed diet, but are also like really aggressively building muscle. They have a really serious muscle goal, and some of them do, right? Where they're in our
Yeah.
Instagram feed too. These like
Yeah.
meathead females who are like cranking it at the gym. It's so impressive. It's not really the
Yeah.
track I'm on. That's fine. It's super
Me either.
impressive.
I'm a little
They
slow.
probably have to be more selective and more
Yeah.
targeted with what they're eating. The women
Mhm.
I work with, almost entirely, with very few, if any exceptions, are like me. They're
Yeah.
kind of in this like middle camp where they're like, I just want to be like really healthy. I want to look good. I want to feel good. I want to know that I'm like doing the right things. I really don't have like exceptional bodybuilding goals. And I'm also not a vegan.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of the like backstory into why we can open our minds a little bit, almost all of us, to like
Mhm.
soy is good for us in a lot of ways. It is a complete protein, but even other plant proteins, which we don't necessarily need to talk about today, can also,
Yeah.
if you're building it in that base of like a diet of variety shooting for a high protein. That's my take on it. Maybe I'll change, but I have done a lot of thinking and reading the research on this, revisiting it, listening to people in different camps with different thoughts whom I respect. I'm really pretty convinced at this point that's the shtick. Soy.
Mhm.
Phytoestrogens are healthy. Great. So
Yeah.
I think the reasons why, and we can talk about the midlife specific reasons, but we've known for years, with regard to heart health, soy has been touted going back decades now.
Mhm.
When I was a baby dietitian, I worked in the top breast cancer clinic in the country.
Mhm.
It was sort of on the heels of all the controversy about soy and by extension hormones.
Yeah.
But even then, most of the research leaned towards soy is beneficial. At that
Mhm.
time, I was very careful and we were very careful to say, like, but let's just keep it to whole foods until we know more. So tofu, edamame, things we know that Asian diets, have included for so long and correlate with their better outcomes with breast cancer specifically and cancer in general. But cardiovascular disease and cancers, the data for soy has been accumulating for a very long time. So those really are, as far as I've seen, the most studied, the most robust. There is some data on all cause mortality, just sort of
Mhm.
this metric in the research with like, how likely are you to die from any
Mhm.
reason under the sun? So there's actually some decent all cause mortality literature for soy, which is like
Wow.
a 10% reduction. Hey, that's pretty good. Nothing to sneeze
Mhm.
at for sure. It shouldn't stand alone. It should do other things too. But hey, that's pretty good. So it's
Mhm.
kind of hard to deny the benefits of soy. Most of what people argue about is the downsides, the risks, and the concerns. So I think the benefits are there. It is a source of fiber. It is a source of protein with, by the way, complete protein. It
Mhm.
has this phytoestrogen component. And so that is, I think, where some of the controversy comes probably in our discussion today and with a lot of the midlife women, that's where most of the controversy lies, is this
Mhm.
estrogen component
Mhm.
or phytoestrogen component. So phytoestrogens, back when I was, a dietitian and this was still being understood, we would sort of refer to them loosely, and I probably do even now, subconsciously, as weak estrogens. They're
Mhm.
plant forms of estrogen that are like weaker in nature than what you would make in your body. So yeah, they're the same, but they're different. But really now, I think what the literature looks like to me is that yeah, we still call them phytoestrogens because they do have some sort of estrogen-like activity in the body, but it seems to be mostly about how they affect estrogen receptors, which are,
Mhm.
all throughout the body, head to toe, right? They're everywhere. Not so much about like raising your estrogen levels. And that has been shown in many human studies with a few exceptions. They don't raise estrogen. They also don't really raise other hormones. A couple exceptions in research studies, but the vast majority of them, and this is like a lot of them, show they don't change the hormone levels. They just affect how the body uses hormones. And I think when it comes to discussions around is estrogen sort of good or bad in the body, that's why that's a concern. And then you have the secondary concern of, and what about hormone replacement therapy with something like a phytoestrogen? That's kind of a complex, even harder to answer question. But the estrogen good or bad, I think most of us have pretty much put that one to bed at this point, right?
Yes,
Like
I hope so. I
estrogen
go on and on, and
good.
I'm always defending estrogen here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, estrogen itself, yes, net positive for sure. A few concerns you have to watch out for, special cases, whatever, but overall good, especially for a woman who's losing it. She just wishes she could have it back. And
Mhm.
every cell in her body does too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think generally it's good. I think when you look at the research closely, and this can kind of get nuanced and may not be of interest to everybody, but I think it will be to some people. When we're
Mhm.
looking at receptors, there's estrogen receptor alpha and there's estrogen receptor beta. And yes, they're both estrogen, but they kind
Mhm.
of like have a little bit different roles, sort of like siblings, but not twins.
Mhm.
And so alpha is really more of a like stimulator, a builder, whereas
Mhm.
beta seems to have a little more, it's sort of like yin and yang, right? Like beta seems to have a little more of the like break effect on estrogen's activity in the body. So you need
Mhm.
both, right? Yin
Yeah.
and yang, they both belong. Soy seems to be multiple times more effective on beta. I don't really understand all the ins and outs of that. I think it's just interesting, like, because I'm nerdy like that. I'm kind of excited to see where we go with understanding that better. I happen, I have to wonder whether that's some of why, like, it doesn't raise levels per se. We measure estradiol in the blood, but it does have this activity, and the activity doesn't seem to be proliferative or,
Mhm.
kind of on the like risky side of what few risks we see to estrogen. So that's kind of a
Yeah.
sidebar conversation we don't have to get into, but I think the point is they are helpful even in this territory of estrogen related things in the body, and we also still don't know it all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fascinating actually about the ER beta. I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing it. And I would hope that it would give women some pause to look at soy maybe a little bit differently. Because I'm sure there are people who do still believe that soy is harmful because of
Mhm.
some of the false narratives that have been going around. So you mentioned hormone replacement therapy, and we do talk about that quite a bit here. I know that you're a fan. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate. I personally use it. I believe you personally use hormone replacement therapy. So this is a question that comes up, and I'm sure it's
Mhm.
come up for you in your practice. Can soy specifically, or even other alternatives, which we may not get into, maybe we'll have you on
Mhm.
another time, can they replace hormone replacement therapy?
Mhm. I think like definitively all caps and bolded, no. It's definitely apples and oranges. I want to be careful with this and sensitive about this too, because increasingly there are women who, for whatever reason, don't have access to hormone replacement therapy or aren't ready to add that. Totally fine.
Mhm.
Totally fine. I just think it's important that all of us, them included, understand like what is it we're expecting out of each thing we're doing for our health and that we're
Mhm.
comparing things fairly to one another. So I think sometimes when you look at soy or other supplements or products for um, perimenopause and menopause that are like phytoestrogens or otherwise somehow are affecting hormonal things in the body, it's almost pitched as this either or, which do you want, which do you prefer?
Mhm.
Um, but they are very different in their potency, at least according to the research we have now. So, soy is great, but 10% all cause mortality really doesn't hold a candle to up to 30% all cause mortality, depending on the study. But HRT wins easily there. Then you
Mhm.
dig down into some of the like specifics and with like lipid lowering, soy I've seen for like LDL cholesterol. Let's just take one lipid that's very meaningful when it comes to heart disease. LDL cholesterol can lower it, a few points, 4 to 5 points. Okay, nice. But I'm not
Mhm.
banking on that either
Right.
versus, HRT, some of those studies say, 10 to 13%, depending on the study. So I do
Mhm.
think it just comes out ahead. For glucose and insulin, for example, soy has been studied, phytoestrogen supplements have been studied for lowering glucose and insulin in postmenopausal women. And yes, it does so significantly lower than baseline. I take it if it's what I had.
Yeah.
But HRT is a multiple of that, 2 to 6 times higher, depending on the study
Wow.
you look at in kind of the same situation, same people.
Mm.
So they are different in potency and also in the specifics that nobody cares about, which is like exactly what they're doing in the body. Women don't care. They just want the results. So I'm telling you,
Yeah,
HRT is
exactly.
superior. And I
Mhm.
think you and I are kind of on a similar page about HRT, so maybe this goes without saying, but what's interesting to me is the quote unquote HRT studies or MHT studies or whatever you want to call hormones, they very often, as you know, use very often they use a bioidentical estradiol. That's more common now.
Yeah.
But either it's just alone, a lot of studies just use it alone, or combine it with a synthetic progestin. That's very common. So much of the research on quote unquote hormone therapy
Yep.
or hormone replacement therapy is one of those two, which is not necessarily what we would do, what we would advocate for as sort of
Mhm.
best way. And even within estradiol, I think the dosing that's, readily available, standardized, FDA approved, and always studied is maybe not even as good as you could do. I mean, some
Right.
women will do better, some women feel better. We've got some emerging data in bone and heart that more is better. So,
Mhm.
sort of a pioneering area of research I'm really excited to watch in the next
Yeah.
decade or so. We don't have the data yet, but I'm out on a limb saying like more might be better
Yeah.
than reason. So, I kind of think when we stack these two together and we say, what do we know about soy? What do we know about HRT? I think the numbers for HRT are like almost pushed down
Yeah.
from what
I
they
agree.
probably really are if we did it in a different and better way. So I can't release them, but truly in the lack of HRT, definitely consider soy and double down on all the other manifold things we know actually work. Protein has some really marked improvements on some of these things. Plants, the number of them and the amount of them.
Mhm.
Other lifestyle factors, fitness being, I have said so many times, I have 2 degrees in nutrition. I've been doing it 20 plus years, and I will still say fitness wins all day long when it comes to what you can actively do for disease reduction and life
Mhm.
extension. So, I mean, there are
Mhm.
so many things you can do in the absence of HRT. Soy, I think, should be on that short list, but use it as a impetus to double and
Yeah.
triple down on those, not just think about what you can't access or make it this like us and them one is better. So the rest of y'all better
Yeah.
just, suck it up and
Exactly.
you know, it's just
Yeah.
choices. That's all it is.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that you're sharing this education because um, when you're educated, then you can make better choices and whatever works for you.
Mhm.
So, just to kind of come back around to soy, we talked a little bit about like the different sources. So, can you kind of come back to that? What are the different sources? Are there some things that women should avoid? Like, what's your preference?
Mhm. Yeah, and I should touch back too on I'm so focused, as I know you are, Claudia, on like the health, the big outcomes, the big stuff, the
Yeah.
like important deep stuff.
Mhm.
But I think it's also fair to say a lot of people reach for soy or other phytoestrogens or other sort of like relief types of supplements for symptoms, for
Yeah.
hot flashes, for
Right.
fatigue, for brain fog, for sleep. But I have to say that even in that category, HRT wins over. So soy definitely has documentation. Mostly it's hot flashes, right? Because that's always what's studied in the research. All of us
Yeah.
earlier in mid perimenopausal women are like, we aren't even having that. We have like all
Yeah.
this
There's
other
like a
stuff.
million other
Can
supplement
you study that?
symptoms. Exactly.
But anyway, soy may help relieve hot flashes in some studies. Certainly worth trying, but
Yeah.
HRT is so much more effective percentage wise. Okay, so
Yeah.
soy foods. I think if you or soy sources, I should say, I would say foods always win when you study them. There are different ways to study foods versus supplements, and that's part of the sticky part about sort of interpreting nutrition and health research. It is fraught with these like sticking points. Foods win in the sense that we have the most amount of like human data on foods. And it's not the same type of data as let's give you a soy pill and watch you for 6 months. That's sort of a different granular type of data. But as far as like safety and real life and actual health outcomes over decades and a lifespan, that we have in the Asian population.
Mhm.
And that would suggest, they would consume, 1 to maybe 4 servings of soy foods in a day, whereas we mostly don't even consume one. So
Yeah.
I would say, as far as like amounts, that's what it is. Types of foods that would be again in like a whole food diet. We're talking about soybeans themselves, edamame. If you want to buy those in the frozen section at the store, you can buy them in canned form. That's fine too. Sometimes you can find fresh ones. That's rare, or any of their derivatives. So
Yeah.
tofu, soy milk, soy protein powder, TVP is sometimes called if you're buying it in the bulk section. These would
Mhm.
be, the main soy food. Soy yogurt sometimes if people are looking for dairy-free alternatives, obviously there's soy yogurt. And then there's like all your junk soy foods,
Yeah.
which may have some value, but there's going to be like highly, highly processed.
Yeah.
And they're sort of like the value is hidden in all this other gunky stuff. I would say talking about whole soy foods, that's obviously what an indigenous Asian population is consuming too. They're not eating impossible burgers. So that's mainly what we're talking about. And then when you're in the sort of next tier category of like, well, it came from a whole food, but it is a little processed, like the protein powders and then bars that use soy protein isolates. These would certainly be like soy when we're talking about the phytoestrogens. But for the most part, the more processed it is, the lower the phytoestrogen component is. So even
Mm,
if it has protein in that protein bar or in that protein powder, generally speaking, the more processed it is, the lower the amount of isoflavones, which are what we're after, right? If we're looking for these
mhm,
phytoestrogen benefits. So whole soy foods or TVP, which is texturized vegetable protein, and that's just soy flour. So it's just
mhm.
milled down soybeans with the fat
Okay.
removed. So that is a really concentrated source of isoflavones, actually. But soy protein isolate, bars, that use that stuff's pretty heavily processed, and the isoflavone content is there, but much lower.
Okay.
That's usually what people are looking at in the States. Then you have supplements that are like,
Yes.
abundant.
We could probably have a whole episode just on supplements alone. Well, I actually have a episode coming out about
Perfect.
supplements because it is a billion-dollar industry. There's a lot of garbage out there. There's like not much quality
Mhm,
control, or it depends on, obviously the brand.
mhm.
And I definitely educate on all of that. But I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about that because
Mhm.
there's a lot of hormone balancing supplements
Yeah,
out there. They are targeted at women in perimenopause. Everywhere you look, there's an ad for something new. So,
yeah,
what are your thoughts on that?
yeah.
And
Well, I think when it comes to soy, and then we can look at all the other ones, because interestingly, because of this like controversy around soy, most of those hormone balancing supplements don't include soy components. Some do,
right.
but they're the minority. If you're out there in the menopause relief supplement world, it's like soy and then the rest of the phytoestrogens or other compounds, and they kind of like stay apart. But anyway, when it comes to soy, I will just say, based on what's been researched, those soy isoflavone supplements, and there are multiple isoflavones, but we kind of know a mix of them is fine. One of them is more potent than the other, yada, yada. In
Mhm.
study, it's roughly 50 milligrams or so of isoflavones up to around 150. That's kind of what the studies have used and shown effects in midlife women for various
Mhm.
reasons. So that would be kind of my like bullseye if I were interested in isoflavone supplements. Again, is a supplement going to carry all the benefits of a whole food? No, but you do get the reliability of like I pop a pill every day and I did it versus did
Yeah.
I eat enough soy food today? Oh, I didn't
Mhm.
get in the calendar. I don't. So popping a
Mhm.
pill is easy, it's reliable, and
Mhm.
it is potent in the sense that we're just taking those isoflavones and getting a bunch of those that we've seen
Yeah.
have benefit. So it's sort of apples and oranges again with food versus supplements. But if you're going the supplement route or wanting to pad your foods with supplements, or sometimes I'll do this with fish oil or other nutrients, like eat your tofu. And if you miss it, pop a supplement.
Yeah.
Like it can be sort of mix and match. So that's the isoflavone category. I genuinely don't think it's harmful
Mhm.
to try that. I mean, you're talking 1 or 2 capsules a day if you're having hot flashes and that's like a simple thing you wanna try to see if it's a quick fix in a few weeks, like low cost, low risk, doesn't hurt in my opinion. If you wanna layer it into a lipid lowering protocol that you're doing, I think isoflavone supplements make a lot of sense there.
Mhm.
Just again, no, this is mainly about symptoms. I really, really would not rely on that for like the long term, like bone prevention, heart
Uh,
protection, disease reduction. I mean, that's not what we're after there. We're just after some like symptom relief on top
mhm.
of your base of, food and lifestyle changes. Then
Mhm.
when it comes to all the other like phytoestrogen supplements, menopause relief supplements. I mean, my general take is kind of same song, second verse, except for I'm not as confident about most of them, even when
Mhm.
it comes to symptom relief, just because of the lack of study. Doesn't mean it can't help. Doesn't mean we just haven't
Right.
studied it yet. I mean, in general, research is not very motivated by supplements because the money is less than
Mhm.
medications. So it's not bad or good. You just need to know that going in. So if research lacks, it could be because it's not worth researching and nobody's put money behind it, or it could be because it's not patentable.
Yeah.
So it's not worth putting money behind it.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I think when it comes to a lot of these other phytoestrogen supplements, I would say maca, rhubarb. I mean, there are a couple that I've seen
Mhm.
multiple human studies of some sort, whether they're the best quality or the biggest, maybe not, but I've actually seen some study to show they
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
So yeah, pick and choose from those. I generally would say combine them in a product. There are these menopause blends.
Mhm.
Now actually makes one called menopause support, I think, that has like
Mhm.
50 or 60 milligrams of phytoestrogens with some of these others in there, yam and chaste and some others.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's like worth a shot. If you just want to like buy one thing and see if it's your thing for relief of symptoms, just know what you're after, know what it can't do for you. Take it with a grain of salt. Just know you might have to try a few to find what works for you.
I agree with you. And I want to just make it clear to women that yes, there's a lot of products out there. Some are good, some are not so good. Some of the ingredients have been studied, some have not. Can they potentially help with your symptoms? Yes, you may feel some pretty quick relief by taking them. And of course, we want you to feel good. But please know that they are not necessarily going to protect you, at least from what we know now, currently, from the chronic diseases that unfortunately many of us do face as we age, whereas hormone replacement therapy does. And this is very common when you are in your perimenopausal years, ladies. Many of you maybe always had like perfect lipids. You go to your doctor, cholesterol, all the numbers look good if they're testing all, your markers. But then you get into your 40s and beyond, and all of a sudden things start creeping up, and you're like, whoa, what's happening? So, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, that's a whole other topic that we can always talk about cholesterol and whatnot. But, there are some things that you can do, of course, to help that. So, because I have been thinking myself, what can I add in? But being cautious because I'm on HRT, what have you found?
Yeah. Not much. Okay, that is the honest answer. We don't know. I think the theoretical, again, back to the whole like, what is the theory that drives the concern that then gets propagated as this like strong message about do this or don't do that? The theoretical concern makes a lot of sense to me, which is like if you got two things that are like fighting for an estrogen receptor and one of them's multiple times more potent, do you really want to risk it?
Yeah.
Putting something else in its spot and then it can't bind there and have the
Mm,
activity that it otherwise could.
mm,
Valid question. I just think we don't know. And the research that I have seen cited, which is very thin, it's like one really terrible review paper of, I don't know, 8 or 10 or 12 things. And most of what was cited was theoretical or petri dish or mouse study. And even that was like scant.
mm,
So I just have not seen research that would say this is actually happening. It's a concern. We should advise people on it. Though I do, concede that the theory makes sense.
mm,
I will say I have colleagues who have been doing, midlife care, including HRT, with more women for more years than I have. So they have more clinical experience than I do, which often does go way before the research, right? Research lags behind clinical and you know, medical society dictates lag
yeah.
behind research.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's the clinician that's
Yeah.
out there on the edge, seeing what they're seeing in practice, and they're the ones who are really leading the charge. So I will say, I have colleagues who have longer clinical experience than I do who say they have seen it in practice. Probably
Mm,
not the majority of women, maybe it doesn't even happen all that often, but they have seen it. And so I think it's worth being mindful of it. I don't think it's worth just throwing the whole baby out with the bathwater in light of, especially when we're talking about soy. Again, there are
mhm,
apparently some cardioprotective benefits. There are some other benefits in health. So here's what I would say. Here's what I'm going to do. I will just say, here's what I'm going to do. I
mm,
currently take estrogen. Am I at my like optimized dose of estrogen? I don't think so. I'm kind of like in that process right now. I
mm,
also am considering bringing in soy more actively. I have tried and tried and tried again to like buy the tofu and make the tofu and eat the tofu. It just is so erratic. I'm probably
mm.
going to like bring in a capsule. I
Yeah.
check more labs on myself than any other client I've ever had because it's fun. So I'm
Yeah.
going to run a little N of one experiment. Just me
Mhm.
checking my labs, watching my feels, looking at how
Yeah.
this works in me, and let's just see. Because I think it's possible that even if there is some credit to this theory, it's A, maybe not happening for everyone. B,
Mhm.
might be dependent on dosing or timing of doses of these two different things, or your gut microbiome, your insulin, your inflammation, all these other things that do affect hormone utilization and processing in the body
Yes.
and the receptors themselves. So I'm going to just try it kind of one thing at a time, one step at a time, and I'm going to watch my symptoms and my labs, which are kind of the metrics I advise women watching,
Mhm.
and just see how it goes. And you can
Mhm.
always pivot. I don't
Yeah.
think there's a reason to like have to pick a camp and know the right answer at the outset. So if you're a woman out there and you're like, I can only pick one or the other, which do I pick? I would say HRT,
Yeah.
but you don't have to do that.
Right.
If you're on HRT and you're considering adding soy, especially if you're like stable on your HRT dose and happy and feeling good, makes sense to me. Add the soy in and watch yourself closely and maybe check labs a couple more times on various metrics and just
Mhm.
see what's going on in your body. If you're someone who's like eating soy and considering adding HRT, same thing, just the reverse order. So I would just
Mm.
like watch your symptoms, watch your labs, work with a provider who's skilled in this, and take it one step at a time and figure it out for you as you go in light of almost total absence of research to guide us here.
Yeah. Yeah. Great
That's my
answer.
thinking.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I mean, just thinking of even myself, I don't know that I would necessarily jump to a supplement right now because I have not been really eating any soy foods. I just kind of been not really avoiding them. It's just it's not my go-to. But
Right.
I would like to start to experiment a little bit myself,
Mhm. Mhm.
solo study,
Yeah.
just to see and to monitor my labs because that is one thing that hasn't been budging much, even
Yeah.
though I'm on HRT and I'm at a pretty high dose of estrogen currently, but I have not seen much budging when it comes to my lipids. I'm not super concerned, but there is a little bit of concern there, and I'm just very curious more than anything to see if it does make a difference for me
Mhm.
personally.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, for the women listening too, I think Claudia's, pretty open. I am too. Like, we're all real people, clinicians included. Like,
Mm.
we probably both talked to a lot of colleagues, and guess what we're talking about in the back rooms? It's ourselves. Like, why
Mhm.
can't I figure this out? Or what do you think about that? Or I'm struggling with this thing here. This isn't responding the way I would expect. We all have issues we're working through, and
Yep.
we are all prone to reach for a quick fix and a magic pill before we want to do the work. So, myself, as
Mhm.
an example, like
Mhm.
I've done some of the work, I've seen some budging, I think like 11% improvement. Okay, great. It's not all I need though. And so what am I going to do? Am I going to like go through this whole big rabbit hole of like deep gut and liver and all the things you could do to help your lipids? No, I'm probably going to buy some soy in a pill. That's
Yeah.
really what I'm going to try to.
I
So just
know.
to say, like, we
Yeah.
are all picking and choosing. And as long as what's on your buffet to pick and choose from is like reasonable, makes sense with regard to human physiology, the available
Mhm.
research, I think we really need to like let go of this right and wrong, do and don't, and like just really get back in tune with like listening to our body, watching our numbers, working with skilled providers, taking things one step at a time, not wanting everything yesterday, and like just
Mhm.
making decisions about what are we going to try. It's like an experiment and we'll see what happens. That'll be interesting versus like
Mhm.
I have to go and research the one right thing and it has to be the one that nobody else says is wrong and it's only this and this is the whole
Yeah.
answer and boom, I'm going to buy it and I'm done. No, that's
Yeah.
just not how it works. And I think
Mm.
part of the process and the
Unfortunately.
work of the process is part of the work of midlife, really, which is like,
Mhm.
slow down. What are you here for? Don't skip ahead. We're in this for the substance and the long game and the deeper issues. So let's like evaluate, and we're all going to cut corners and pick and choose, and that's okay. Some of that's okay. But
Mhm.
like we have to be intentional about this process and be okay with the process of it.
Yes. I love that. And I agree. I often say this is an invitation to slow down
So good.
because we've all been sped up for so long and there is so much noise out there in regards to do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, and it could make your head spin. And this is the time of our life where we need to be less stringent and a little bit easier on ourselves, more self-love, more self-care, more just being patient with our bodies because they are changing. And like you said, I mean, we're dealing with our own stuff as clinicians. And, there's days where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what supplement can I take or what can I do to fix this? And I know it is a long game. And yeah, I mean, we're doing the best we can. So thank you so much for being here. This was an
Yeah.
awesome conversation. It was really, really helpful. I'm sure women will love this episode. So where can women find you and how can they learn more about working with you?
Yeah, thank you. So I am back to the book nutrition, all spelled out. That's
Mhm.
my website, backtobooknutrition.com. I'm back to the book nutrition on Instagram and I think on Facebook.
Mhm.
Pretty sure that's what it was 10 years ago when I started that. So that's mostly where I hang out is Instagram and my website. I work with women one-on-one and in a perimenopause program. And I do offer discovery calls. So if people are interested in working together, they can sign up for a call and we can chat. But yeah, thanks for having me. This has been really fun, Claudia.
Great. Thank you so much. And we will link to all that in the show notes. Ladies, I hope this episode was helpful to you. Until next time. Hey, before you go, if you want to know the 10 things that I do every day to improve my energy, mood, and maintain a healthy weight in perimenopause, grab my free resource, Perimenopause Daily Checklist, via the link in the show notes. You'll learn my daily morning and evening rituals, how I reduce overwhelm and get stuff done, how to structure meals to feel good, and much more. Perimenopause doesn't have to be such a struggle. Let's flip the script so you can feel and look your best. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not, nor do I act as a doctor or any other medical professional. I am not providing healthcare, medical services, or attempting to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any physical, mental, or emotional disease or condition. The information shared is not intended to be a substitute for the professional medical advice provided by your own medical or mental health provider.